Welcome to the Cryptoteacher. And guys, I come back with that video just to make you think. We have Ben GOERTZEL and also Charles Hoskinson from, of course, Cardano. Now, I talk all the time about Singularity, and that I've done a few videos in regards to that. But then also I talk about algorithms a lot and what they're speaking about and how powerful corporations are starting to move us in a certain direction. And then plus how algorithms that are being created are doing the divide and conquer, the Hegelian dialectic that I speak about all the time. And I know some of y'all be wondering, what is he talking about? So that's the reason why I'm bringing you this video, because it is the perfect video for this, because you have two great minds speaking about the manipulation that's being done by algorithms, not people, but of course people are building them. But eventually these algorithms, with all this machine learning coming in, are going to be able to do this on their own. So remember, guys, when it comes to the New World Order, everything is planned out. Enjoy the video.
All right, pleasure to be chatting once more, Charles. And I thought it'll be amazing to have a sort of on-air discussion on the topic that's been in so many people's minds recently, which is the perhaps critical importance of decentralization for social media and social networks, because this is something we've both been thinking about deeply for quite a long time and have been both moving toward action on for quite a long time in our own ways, me with the AI spin and you with Cardano and blockchain. But now things seem to be coming to a head, and the world seems to suddenly be concerned that a few large corporations are programming everyone's brains in bizarre and nefarious
million times. At some point, you got to throw the guy out. The issue was the deplatforming of Parler, because that was a very different animal. So the whole argument was, well, if you don't like Twitter, go compete with it, build your own social network. That's exactly what Parler did. They had different moderation standards. But then what occurred was that all of Silicon Valley got together and they colluded, and they basically jointly decided to completely deplatform Parler. So Amazon took them down, Apple took them down, Google took them down. And if you're put in a market position where 100% of the mobile market and most of the web market is basically blacklisting you, and you have no way to be on a cell phone for an average consumer, no way to have a website for an average consumer without going to extraordinary lengths, and it's almost like the Pirate Bay. You have to host servers in Afghanistan or something to escape it. That's very problematic. It feels like Standard Oil controlling the shipping prices of oil back in the 19th century.
Yeah, and the appeals to ethics seem so disingenuous, right? It's
Right.
like you can search QAnon garbage on Google just fine. So then why is it so unethical for there to be QAnon garbage on Parler as some of the content, right? I
Right.
mean, they have the idea that these big tech companies are acting out of sort of a moral necessity to save everyone's lives. I mean, it rings very hollow, right? And I mean, no doubt some people in those companies really are thinking that way, but
Right.
the alignment of these marginal ethical arguments with like obvious corporate like profit interests as being advanced by apparent like explicit collusion among these big players. I mean,
Yeah,
it makes it hard to take the ethical aspect 100% seriously. It's to learn to win in games or video games, which is both a problem and a benefit, is that the AI will learn to do what you asked it to do. So like if you're asking it to get maximum points in this game, and there's a way to do it by like hacking around the rules of the game in some weird way no human would ever think of, like the AI will explore various options, and if it's working well, we'll find some route to achieve the objective function you wanted without taking into account whatever implicit constraints you had about like what's the artful way to do it. And I think something similar exists with social media companies. I mean, they have certain metrics and objectives they're working toward. often very, very systematically internally, right? I mean, they want people to be looking at their site as long as possible, for example, or they want them to be spending as much as possible clicking on ads, and they'll put a lot of human and algorithmic effort into optimizing toward that goal. And then we can't be very surprised that these groups of brilliant people making cool software built systems that are optimizing toward that goal, like via whatever hacks they can find. And those hacks include exploiting human cognitive biases, as you noted, and exploiting dynamics of addiction in the human brain,
Right.
and all sorts of human emotional patterns, exploiting human angst, and then the desperation and existential confusion. And I mean, the algorithms and the corporate systems will exploit whatever they can to achieve the goals they're given. And as you say, it's organized so that these sort of corporate organisms, which are now sort of hybrid human and digital computing process organisms, like these corporate organisms are almost like a parasite on modern society, and they're achieving their own goal pretty effectively. But that's, if you took a bird's eye view of human society and where we want to be and where we want to go during the next few years, it may be leading toward the singularity and creation of AGI and all that. Like
Right.
a situation where these corporate human slash computer networks oriented toward maximizing shareholder value by getting you to buy stuff online and stare at their website as long as possible. I mean, these sorts of organizations having that much power is not the optimal dynamic for shaping like the collective mind, heart, and soul of humanity, right? I mean, it's pretty far off from where we want to be. And you'd imagine that like extremism and siloing and tribalism, which we're seeing online and in real life, I think that's probably only scratching the surface of the screwed up patterns that are being fostered. Like that's the surface layer where it's easy to see how screwed up it is, and there's so many other screwed up like individual and collective dynamics that are happening. I wouldn't say all caused by this organization of social media and the tech industry, but certainly co-evolving with it and codependent
Right.
on it.
I tend to agree with Max Tegmark in this respect, where you invent the car first and then you invent the safety belt. So with new technology or new processes, there's a lack of wisdom in the safety components of it until after you've suffered the consequences. So we look to the oil and gas industry. In the 19th century, they started drilling all these wells, and only after they started doing that did we start thinking about environmentalism. And we said, well, maybe that it's not such a good idea just to have unrestricted oil well drilling. Maybe we need to think carefully about what this is actually doing to the environment. Well, the oil of the 21st century is really the attention economy and the data economy. And we have all this surveillance capitalism, and we have all these early pioneering firms, and they're effectively mining, to use an analogy, where these algorithms are built and these platforms are built in a way to exacerbate human nature. So to your point that they didn't cause it, but I'd certainly say that they're exacerbating it, and
They're
it's
part of the process of its growth. Absolutely. And
right.
I mean, I think I always think of everything in human society from sort of the end game of legacy humanity. Like we're working on creating AGI. If we can create a benevolent AGI, I mean, this is going to make our current problems seem sort of archaic and silly. Of course, things won't be perfect. There'll be new problems we can't imagine now. But this is certainly the biggest threshold event in the history of humanity, perhaps of life on Earth, right? And we could be a few decades from that, even less. I mean, as Ray Kurzweil and others have argued, but if there's even a decent odds that this singularitarian view is true, I mean, then how the collective mind of humanity is shaped is insanely important, right? Because the first AGI probably isn't going to be just like a superhuman supermind in a box, totally separate from human society. The way things are going, it's more likely to come out of the interaction of multiple different AI components made by multiple parties, serving useful economic functions in the world at large. So if the first AGI, which sort of triggers this singularity, is coming out of the whole mess of the tech ecosystem and people using technology to do useful things. I mean, then how messy that mess is an extremely important thing, and that right now the direction does not look like the internet AI tech ecosystem is evolving in a great configuration for spawning a benevolent super AGI like 5, 10, or 20 years from now, right? Maybe some redirection if some of the sub networks in there, like the ones we're involved with, could affect it. Some redirection would be highly beneficial.
That's kind of like the Deus Ex Machina situation where you're saying, well, we could solve this problem if we have this insanely powerful tool, and it's like, well, yeah, but maybe we don't actually need a tool that powerful to make meaningful progress towards this problem. I
For
think that,
decentralized social networks, you don't need AGI.
yeah,
Absolutely not. You can do a lot with blockchain networks interoperating with
but
narrow
well,
AI. Yeah.
hang on. So I think an AI solution does provide a lot of value, but I look at it more like a cognitive crutch. So if you injure your leg, you get on crutches or you walk with a cane or something like that. I recently had a gout attack, and for 2 weeks I was on a cane. So it's kind of funny we physically think about this, but for the mental stuff, we don't really think we need it. So, oh, our brains are perfectly well functions. Like, no, we're dopamine addicts. We're constantly manipulated by digital devices, and we're in a situation where we're not acting rationally or objectively most of the time. We're
Yeah.
unable to.
We lack root access to our hardware and software,
Exactly,
so we
exactly.
can't fix the bugs in a direct way.
And so the question is, what would be the simplest possible agent, intelligent agent, that could be constructed that can act as a cognitive crutch to alert us if we are being manipulated or our behavior is exhibiting patterns that have
Yeah.
look like they've been propagandized. That feels like it would be a massive step forward in
Right. So now we're getting at some of the stuff that I'm hoping we will be able to build together with the
right,
Singularity net on the Cardano network.
hide them as much as possible because it's actually boosting revenue. So
Because I think that's an easier problem to solve, right? Like that's the easiest way to keep. I mean, righteous indignation and the glorious feeling of being approved by others in your in group and jointly indignant at the guys in the next group. Like this is a really easy emotion to manipulate with people. It's sort of a low hanging fruit, and they're to an extent these networks implicitly got stuck in manipulating this low hanging fruit because it was the easiest way to keep people staring at their app, right? I mean, just as
right,
the internet settled on porn with a lot of its bandwidth, because that's a really low algorithmic complexity way to keep people staring at something is show them naked bodies, right? So if something would give greater benefit and even get people to stare at their site longer in the long run, but isn't quite as simple of a problem, it sort of gets bypassed, right? In the loop of trying to incrementally achieve these metrics more and more each month. And yeah, what's interesting is that the thought that rearranging sort of the configuration of the tech stack, as you suggested in the beginning of the conversation, so like rearranging the tech stack so that the protocols are separate from the applications, and then the AI models and tools used to create the AI models and inspect the AI models they're also separate from the applications. I mean, reorganizing things in this way, then it sort of opens up the dynamics of the whole ecosystem in a way that I believe has decent odds of leading to the evolution of social media tools that they give people what they want in a more profound sense, and in doing so, they're creating communication networks among people that are not focused entirely on sort of immediate gratification of the ego and stoking of intertribal rivalries and so forth, because all these good and beautiful things we're alluding to exist on the internet right now, like they exist
right.
in the what we're planning out now with a certain amount of AGI ADA tokens. I think we can do something catalyst based that can help get AI developers on the Singularity net on Cardano platform, and can help build toward both, applied narrow AI in domains from social media to medicine to DeFi, as well as help the components toward AGI. But there's also much bigger things. Like if you think about it, we're competing with these trillion-dollar companies, right? So
we're going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go. But clearly, we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign of what's going to happen to these other workers moving forward.